I recently got an email from my new friend Doug asking me if it was possible to recreate this XKCD projection in QGIS. And that's what you see on screen now. It's from Randall Munro's XKCD webcomic. And what he's done here is he's created a world map projection where the values for longitude are never negative. That's why it's called longitude equals abs longitude. So there's no negative values, and it kind of looks weird but also quite interesting. And after a little bit of back and forth with Doug, I came up with something that kind of worked. So we're just going to step through the stages I went through to get there in this video, just for a bit of fun, but also it's quite useful to learn about the different functions in Geometry Generator and the kinds of things you can do. Maybe this will never be useful for you, but it should help you practice your skills with Geometry Generator. So that's the webcomic, and this is my kind of version in QGIS. And I should say, if you do want to get the XKCD font, I will put the links in the description, but somebody has very nicely created a font, just like Randall Munro's handwriting. So let's take a look at this. This is the project where I've just created things as they kind of look in the comic. So in order to figure out how we get here, all we need to do is we need to have a world map layer. So I only started with one world map layer. It's the one you see in the layers panel on the left. It's a natural earth layer. It's a fairly generalized world layer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just close this project and then recreate it step by step. It's not that difficult. The things that are tricky are knowing how to do the geometry generators, but I'll show you them, and what I'll also do is I'll share them in the description. So I'll start a fresh project and I'll just discard what I had. So now what I'm going to do is I'll open the project I shared with Doug, and I'm just going to hit auto find on this to find the layers. Okay, so there's a couple of layers here, and all I've done is copied the land layer. So let me just double click on the land layer. I'll go to Geometry Generator, and I'm just going to remove this for now, and I'll just type geometry, and I'll click OK. Now the reason it's kind of weird at the top is because I'm using a Pacific-centric coordinate reference system. So if I click down the bottom right button, if I change that back to, I don't know, Studio Mercator and click OK, that'll go back to the sort of normal view. So I used 54037 as the projection, so I'm just going to use that again. And what I did first of all to this red layer is I double clicked it and I applied the geometry generator. Before I applied the geometry generator, I right clicked and I duplicated it. So we have two layers. Okay. So in the first one, the red one, let's double click and look at the geometry generator as I put it in. I'll paste it back in here. And I'll hit the expression button. So let's see what's going on. We've got densify by count, we've got intersection and rotate, and we've got flip coordinates, and we've got make polygon, and we've got all sorts of things going on. Now these can be pretty hard to decipher if you don't know what's going on, but basically there's a function here called flip coordinates, so we're flipping the coordinates essentially. Now if I'm going to just copy this expression. If I was to just use flip coordinates on the geometry, you can see what it does. It sort of flips it sideways. Let me just try and turn this to a CRS where you can see what it looks like. So that's what flip does, but that's not enough. We need to do some more things to it. So the expression I used here, I'll paste it back in. It flips it, but then it also rotates it by 270 degrees. And I chose to make the rotation center point 0, 0, so 0 latitude and 0 longitude. But I also wanted to clip it. So I didn't want it to go from minus 180 degrees to 180 degrees. I only want positive values for longitude. That's why I'm clipping it. Let me just hit enter on this so we can see it. I'm clipping it using a polygon. That's why I've got make polygon. I'm making a polygon out of a line string set of values at these specific points: 0 degrees X value, 90 degrees north, 180 degrees, which is east, 90 degrees north, 180 degrees, 90 degrees south, and so on. It might take you a little bit of time to decipher this, but it's in the description so you can use it yourself. The last thing I did was I also used densify by count, and I densified it by 100. And what that does, it adds intermediate points to your clipping shape so that you get a smooth edge. You don't need that, but you won't get the smooth edge to the edge of the map if you don't do that. So that was what I did in this layer, and I get something that looks like this. Okay, if I turn the other one on, we could see they're both in the eastern hemisphere now. So this one looks like it should. This one is flipped. So the one that looks like it should, if I double click it, and the geometry generator there, all we've really got going on, we've done the densify by count, and you won't notice the effect of that until you change the projection. And then we've got this intersection, and that's basically working like a clip, and it clips it to the same bounding box using this LINESTRING function. Once again, if you copy and paste this and spend some time trying to decipher it, but that's how it works. But at the moment, it's not quite as we want it, so let's just change the CRS by clicking the button in the bottom right. And I'm just going to use this Pacific centric one. To find it on your machine, probably 54037 is the number to type in, and then you'll probably go down below and choose equal Earth Asia Pacific, and then you can click OK. So then we get the kind of curvy edges. And just to demonstrate one more time the densify by count thing, if I double click this, let me move this over a bit. If I was to change the geometry generator, so instead of densify by 100 vertices in this bounding box, if I just change that to 0 and click apply, you can see you get a kind of chunkier edge, so the Africa edge is not curved. So that's why I use densify by count. Okay, so we've got that, that's fine, but geometry generator used like this is only a stylistic thing. It is not a permanent thing. We can make it permanent by using the processing toolbox, which I've turned on already. And in there, if you search for geometry by expression, there it is. So that's what we're going to use. So first of all, I'll do the top layer. I'm going to create a new geometry here, and I'll go to my geometry generator and I'll just copy the text. Click OK. Now I'll double click this. I'm going to do it on the land layer. The output type is polygon, and I'll hit the expression button. I'm going to paste in the expression. I'll click OK. If you're doing this yourself and you want to follow along, you can save it to a new geo package or shapefile. I'm just going to do this temporarily, so I'm going to save it to a temporary layer for now. I'll hit run and then close. So there's our first modified geometry. It matches the red one. And we're going to do it again on the copied layer. So all I need to do is double click, go to symbology, click on geometry generator. I'm going to copy this. And I'll click on OK. I'll do geometry by expression again, and we're doing it on the copied layer. Polygon is fine. I'll hit the expression button and I'll paste the expression in there. So this is creating permanent new geometries using these expressions. Click OK. Again, I'll just use a temporary layer. If you're following along, feel free to save to a new layer. I'll hit run and close. Okay, so what we've got there, let me turn off the original ones. We've got two new shapes, but I want these to be a single new shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, let's merge them. We can't dissolve because it's two separate layers, but let's just type in merge. And I'll double click on merge vector layers, which I've used recently here. And the input layers will be the two modified geometries. I'll click OK. Again, don't change this destination CRS. I'm not going to save this to a new layer. That's fine. I'll hit run and I'll hit close on that. And then now my merge layer is, now it's all in one layer. Then I will use dissolve, which I recently used, but you can just search for dissolve. I'll double click it. I'm dissolving the merge layer. That's all I need to do. I just hit run. Now, sometimes this happens, and it's quite good that it does happen here. For something like this, it says it's got invalid geometry. It doesn't really, so I'll go back to parameters. I'll click the little spanner, and I'll just tell QGIS on invalid feature filtering to do not filter. And that will solve this problem. And I'll hit run now. Close that, and there we have our shape. Now, if I look at this, let's move this over. We're getting somewhere with what we've got here. It's not bad. But what else do we need to do? Well, another thing we can do here is we can add a kind of backdrop to show the extent of the world. So if I type in extent here, we can extract the layer extent. So let's do that. We're going to extract the extent of the new dissolved layer. I'll double click on it, make sure the input layer is dissolved. Don't worry about the warnings here. Again, save the file if you want to. I'm not going to bother. And I'm going to hit run and then close. Now this shows two things. It shows the extent of the world, but it's not quite right. And the reason it's not quite right is because we need to densify. This edge here and this edge here does go to from 0 to 180 degrees east, but it's got no intermediate vertices, so it needs to be densified, and then it'll be okay. So I'll double click it. I will go to symbology, I'll click simple fill, and now I'm going to go to geometry generator. And all I'll do here, I can just type this in. I'll type in densify underscore by count, open bracket, and then after geometry I'll just type comma 100, close brackets, and I'll click OK. So then we get the curved line. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop this underneath, and then let me just shift this over. I've got this on my other screen, so I'll just change the color. So I'll double click dissolved, I'll go to simple fill, so I'm going to use the pick color to pick the color from the Randall Munro map. I'll make the outline 0.46, I'll click OK. And then for the background, I'm going to make it the grey colour that Randall Munro's got in his, so it's a grey backdrop colour. I'll double click on my extent layer. I'll go to simple fill. I'll use the drop down, I'll hit pick colour, I'll pick his grey, and I'll make it a bit thicker on the outline. Okay, so that's not bad, but if I shift this over and get Randall Munro's map back, we can see the center point's not ideal here. So how can we fix it so like 90 degrees east is right in the middle? We can do that quite easily actually in QGIS with a custom projection. And the easiest thing to do here is, I've got this projection on at the moment, 54037, the coordinate reference system, I should really say. So if I click on that button, and then I make sure that I'm in CRS, if I scroll down here until you get to the things as Proj 4, I'm just going to copy this. Okay, I'm going to copy that, click OK. Then I'm going to go to settings and custom projections. So I have already created a custom projection called abs longitude, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this and do it again. So here I'm in user defined CRS, I'll click the plus button, I'm going to call this one abs longitude, just like Randall Munro. The format, I'm going to change it to proj string. Don't worry that it says not recommended, it's fine. And I'll paste that in here. But this 150 value, I actually want that to be 90 for 90 degrees to the east. I'll hit validate. Projection is valid, great, okay. It's called abs longitude, so that's what I've called it, but you could call it anything. I'll click OK. And then I'm going to go to the CRS button in the bottom right. And then I'll search for my new projection in the filter box. Just type in ABS, there it is. That's it. If I scroll down, I can see what I just put in the Proj 4 section. Let me click OK. So that's looking pretty decent. Let me just take over this. And yeah, I'm fairly happy with what I've done here. Obviously there's loads of other writing on it, you could do that yourself. But let me put that back in the middle. I'll zoom out a little bit. So we've got that looking okay. I will go to View and then Decorations and Title Label. Let's type in what he's called the projection. Longitude equals abs longitude. I'll go to font. I'll change that, well, to XKCD script. I've already downloaded the font and installed it. I'll use regular, size 48. I'll click OK. The background bar color, I'll click that patch and change it to 0% opacity. And the vertical, I'll just change that to 5 to shuffle the text down a bit. And I'll click OK. And now we have something fairly decent. The last thing you could do if you wanted to introduce some place names, you can get world place names from loads of places, but Simple Maps is a good place to look. I will put the link in the description. I've already downloaded that. So it's a CSV file. So I'll click on here. I'll go to delimited text and I'll browse to the file I saved. I got the world cities layer, which has got thousands of world cities. So I'll just click open, and when I import this CSV point coordinates, I just need to tell QGIS that the X field is LNG for longitude and the Y field is lat and the CRS is WGS84. That's fine. I'm going to add this and then close. And the cities obviously are actually as they really are in the world at the moment. We don't want that. So I'm going to right click it first of all and filter it to just show ones with population more than, say, 5 million, or capital equals primary. So this is just to reduce the number of cities that I'm showing. I'm just showing cities that have got more than 5 million people according to this data set, or that are the primary capital of a country. Test that. Okay, so there's still loads of points. Let me do, or let me change it so I'm only doing capital equal primary and population more than 500,000. So this should reduce the number. Yeah, 141. So this is only going to show those cities that are the primary capital and where the population is more than 500,000. I'll click OK. But we have a problem because some of the cities in the Western Hemisphere have negative values for the longitude. So I'll double click on world cities. I'll go to symbology and then I'll click simple marker. And here we will go to geometry generator. And this is going to be pretty simple. I'll click on the expression button because I already did this in preparation for this video. So if I go down to my recent expressions and double click this one, we're using make point. So make point will make a point at 2 coordinates, and we're using the y coordinate of the point and we're using the x coordinate, but you can see for the x coordinate we're using its absolute value, so there'll be no negatives. So if I click OK and OK again, then we get all these cities displayed. So the last thing I'll do, let me just double click, change it to a smaller dot. Let me see if that's okay, size 1. Maybe make it a little bit bigger, 1.4. Okay. And there's probably quite a lot there, so let's just change the population value to over 2 million. That's still quite a lot, but never mind. I'll double click it. I'll go to labels. I'll change it from no labels to single labels. Change the value to city. So it's going to label it with a city name. And I will do XKCD script as the font. Let me try apply on that. What I need to do is change it all to uppercase. I can do the uppercase in many ways, but the easiest one here is go to formatting and just go to all uppercase. Hit apply. There we go. Probably needs a little bit of buffer so we can see it sometimes. Draw text buffer. Okay. So when you do this kind of thing as well, you'll notice the labels are displaying where the cities actually are, which is sometimes rather frustrating, but don't worry about it. Because as long as you're using a recent version of QGIS, you can set the label position with the geometry generator as well. So I'll double click it, the World Cities layer, go to symbology, go to my geometry generator. I'm just going to copy this because we're going to use this geometry generator expression in the label section, and we'll go to placement. If you don't see this option in geometry for a geometry generator, you probably just have an older version of QGIS. So I'm going to tick that box and I'll just paste that in. And that's going to use the geometry generator expression to set the position for the labels. So if I move this over and I click, let me click apply and then OK, we have all the labels all over the map. There's too many labels at the moment, so let me just change the population value to more than 5 million, just to reduce the number. Okay, so there we go. That's how we can go from an idea, from something we've seen, using our imagination in Geometry Generator to get something approximating the Randall Munro absolute longitude map. The last thing I'll do, because I'm obsessed with label placement, is double click this, change the label distance to 1 millimeter away from the point, just to give them a bit more space. Okay, so that's how you can do that. Hopefully you'll find it useful. Just check out the description for the various geometry generator expressions and the links. But hopefully you find that useful and you'll have a bit of fun and you'll learn something along the way.